Gemini, the third sign of the Zodiac, represented by the twins, because one of anything was clearly never going to be enough. It's the sign that runs from May 21st to June 20th, that restless stretch of the year when everything feels like it's moving fast, including your attention span. But Gemini is more than half-finished conversations and abandoned trains of thought. It's the sign of ideas, language, and asking questions that lead to even more questions. It's the sign of curiosity, communication, and having something to say about absolutely everything. So grab your notebook, your microphone, and your messaging app, because the cosmos is about to get interesting. Today we're jumping into the sign of Gemini, which means for the next 25 minutes or so I'll be doing my best to keep up with a mind that's having 3 arguments at once, and winning all of them. Gemini is the sign of communication, curiosity, and asking questions. Lots of questions. Why is it like that? What happens if I do this? And more importantly, why did I walk into this room in the first place? Ruled by Mercury, this is the part of the Zodiac that deals with thinking, speaking, learning, and occasionally arguing with itself just to keep things interesting. It's quick, clever, and very rarely quiet. So in this episode we're going to explore the history, mythology, psychology, and personality of Gemini, from ancient texts to modern traits. We'll take a trip to Korrespondence Corner for the tarot, the gems, and the herbs, including a brief and possibly ill-advised update from Dr. Neuralis and his latest experiment. But first, our fool is about to find out what happens when the mind starts moving faster than the person attached to it.
The Fool's Odyssey.
The fool is still trundling along on his train around the Zodiac wheel.
Now approaching Gemini. Please get ready for a barrage of information you never asked for.
As the fool steps off the train, he suddenly finds himself sitting in a late-night chat show.
Welcome to Cosmic Chat. We're your host Gemini, and tonight's special guest is a traveller, a thinker, and a man on a journey. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Fool.
What's going on?
Fantastic to have you with us. Now tell us, who are you? Where are you going? What are you looking for? And do you prefer sweet or savoury? Interesting. We'll come back to that, or maybe we won't.
I haven't actually said anything yet.
Exactly. Mysterious. We like that.
I was just getting off the train.
A train. Fascinating. Love trains. Hate delays. Do you think trains have feelings? Because if they do, that one's been through a lot.
I just need my ticket stamped.
Ticket, yes, important. Very important. Metaphor for life, really, isn't it? We're all just trying to get stamped, validated, approved.
No, I mean like literally stamped.
Literal. Love that. Big fan of literal. Also a big fan of metaphor. Depends on the day.
Look, if you can just...
So tell us, do you think identity is fixed, fluid, or somewhere in between? And while you're thinking about that, what's your favourite colour?
I've never really...
Bold choice.
But I didn't say.
No, I see it. Very you.
I just need to...
Of course you do. We all do. Needs, wants, desires, biscuits.
Biscuits?
Don't get me started on biscuits.
Please, can we just stop for a minute? For the first time since arriving, there's a moment of silence. Sorry, it's all just getting a bit too much.
We understand. You see, Gemini is the sign of communication, ideas, questions, curiosity. We follow every thread, chase every thought.
Yeah, I gathered that.
But sometimes in all that talking, we forget to listen.
Well, in that case, can I just say...
Absolutely.
Look, I really just need to get my ticket stamped.
Of course you do. There you go.
Thank goodness for that.
Now before you go, have you ever wondered why pigeons...
Sorry, I'm late for my train. And before the fool can be drawn into another conversation, he quickly makes his escape back to the Cosmic Constellation Express. To be continued. And now we return to the buttocks of destiny, where the rapid-fire questions, constant interruptions, and frankly exhausting conversation of Gemini have left our poor fool slightly frazzled, taking our arrow away from the happy cheek and pointing straight to the dusky donut of fate. Will the fool find his way out of the miasma? Find out next time on The Fool's Odyssey. The history of Gemini. Time to dive into the history books, starting with our favourite 1st century wordsmith Marcus Manilius and his poetic take on the twins. In Astronomica he wrote, "Soft Gemini to easier arts incline, for softer studies fit an infant sign. They tune rough words or they incline to sing, or strike the speaking string." So right away Manilius paints Gemini as a sign of communication, expression and the arts. These are the people who tune rough words, smoothing things over, telling stories, cracking jokes, or just generally having something to say about absolutely everything. When he talks about singing and striking the speaking string, he's obviously pointing to voice, language, performance and things like that. This is Mercury doing its thing, thinking, talking, writing, and occasionally interrupting itself halfway through a sentence to start a completely different one. Skipping forward a century to Claudius Ptolemy and Tetrabiblos, he said Gemini in its general tendency is temperate, but its leading parts produce mischief by moisture. So I think he's saying that Geminis are pretty well balanced for the most part. As for mischief by moisture, that sounds like something you should probably get checked out, but what he's really getting at is movement and things not staying still. Yeah, let's go with that. On a side note, he also points out that their posterior parts produce great vigour. I think that means they're really good at twerking. Anyway, let's see which angels and demons we've got watching over Gemini. In the good books we've got Ambriel, whose name means orator of God, so that's pretty bang on for the twins. Apparently he's in charge of teaching astrology, geometry and arithmetic, so a bit of an all-round clever clogs by the sound of it. On the naughty step we've got Sorariel, although he doesn't sound too bad to be honest. His name somewhat confusingly means Prince of God, and apparently he's tasked with providing protection from other spirits. So as archdemons go, I think Gemini have done quite well here. He's also associated with the movements of the moon. The Artemis mission is on its way there as I'm writing this, so maybe they'll spot him skulking about on the dark side.
The mythology of Gemini.
Kicking things off in ancient Mesopotamia, long before the Greeks got involved, the Babylonians were already watching these stars. In their astronomical texts they were known as the Great Twins, and they were associated with two minor deities named Meshlamatea and Lugalera. I think I got that right, which roughly translates to the one who has arisen from the underworld and the mighty king. Both of these were linked to the god Nergal, the ruler of the underworld and a deity associated with plague and destruction. So not exactly the pair of light-hearted chatty twins that we've come to know and love. Things start to chill out a bit when we get to ancient Egypt. We find these same stars appearing on the Dendera zodiac, but here they were thought of as a male and a female pair. So rather than just doubling something, the Egyptians seem to be expressing duality through contrast, that masculine and feminine energy. By the time we reach the Greeks, these twins finally take on names, personalities and a story that brings all of this duality into sharp focus. They become Castor and Pollux, the twin sons of Leda, who apparently were conceived by different fathers. The story goes that Castor was conceived by Leda's husband, Tyndareus, who was the king of Sparta. Pollux, on the other hand, came about when Zeus seduced Leda. Now before you start judging Leda for getting jiggy behind her husband's back, you have to bear in mind that Zeus had turned himself into a swan. So that makes it perfectly acceptable. In any case, it meant that only Pollux was immortal, and he was devastated when Castor died, so he asked Zeus if he could share his immortality. Zeus complied and turned them into the Gemini constellation, where they became the patrons of horsemen and sailors. Apparently they appear to sailors as St. Elmo's fire, which is a weather phenomenon where luminous plasma appears on a ship's mast as a result of atmospheric electrical charge. I was today years old when I found out that it wasn't just a Brat Pack movie from the 80s with a really good soundtrack.
The psychology of Gemini.
Emerging from the mists of time and into the modern era, when anxiety was invented, Carl Jung had this to say: Gemini, the fertility of man, one seldom does better than the twins. Now when Jung talks about fertility here, he's not referring to putting it about and having loads of kids. He's obviously talking about the mind. The ability to generate ideas, make connections, produce thoughts and that kind of how'd you do. And in that sense, Gemini is incredibly fertile. Not just one perspective, but multiple, always splitting, comparing and multiplying whatever's going on upstairs. He goes on to say this sign stands for a pair of brothers, and they too have a somewhat antithetical nature. So again, we're back to this idea of two, but not just two things sitting nicely next to each other and sharing a beer. It's two things that don't quite agree. Really, we're talking about disagreement and internal debate, a kind of running commentary where both sides are fully convinced they're right. It's a bit like thinking out loud but with opposition. Anyway, at this point he gets busy with the religious posturing again. He says the motif of the brothers is found very early in connection with Christ, for instance amongst the Jewish Christians and the Ebionites. From all this we may risk the conjecture that the Talmudic prophecy was based on astrological premises. He keeps coming back to this idea that a lot of religious symbolism might have been influenced by astrology. He never quite commits to it, but he definitely keeps hinting in that direction. In any case, I think that when it comes down to the individual psyche, Jung is referring to those times when your mind is a bit split over something. Really, that's the essence of Gemini, a mind that's constantly bouncing between possibilities. One side of you is thinking it through, the other's already halfway out the door. And depending on which side of that conversation is winning, things can go very well. Or not.
The personality of Gemini.
Time to look at some of those famous traits of the twins, starting with what's going on under the hood. First of all, Gemini is yang, masculine or positive polarity, so its energy flows outwards, usually in the form of a lengthy and expressive conversation. There's always plenty to talk about when the twins are involved. Elementally, Gemini is an air sign, so we're firmly in the realm of the mind here. Air signs deal with communication and understanding, so it's less about what's happening and more about what it means. More likely to be curious and ask questions. It's also a mutable sign, which means it's more adaptable and prone to change, sometimes very prone to change. If we compare that to the other air signs, you can really see the difference. Libra is cardinal, so it likes to initiate things. Aquarius is fixed, so once it's made its mind up, that's it, locked in. Gemini is in the middle of all that, shifting and responding to whatever's going on. It likes to explore things from every possible angle. And when you combine all that with Mercury as its ruling planet, things really start to make sense. Mercury is the planet of communication and language. It's how we process the world and how we connect ideas together. Now Mercury also rules Virgo, which we've already looked at, but it shows up very differently there. In Virgo, Mercury is focused and analytical. It's about getting things right and paying attention to the details. In Gemini, Mercury is much quicker, more curious and playful, and a lot less concerned with getting everything perfect. So what's the good news? Well, Gemini is one of the most mentally agile signs in the Zodiac. You can think on your feet, adapt quickly, and pick things up faster than most people can keep up with. We've talked about that natural curiosity. You want to know how things work, why they work, and what happens if you poke them just to see what they do. Conversations come easily, usually very easily. You're good at explaining things and helping them make sense to other people. And perhaps most importantly, you're never boring. There's always something going on upstairs, even if no one else knows what it is. Of course, there's a flip side to all this. The same mind that can think quickly can also get distracted just as fast, so focus is optional. Conversations can wander, thoughts can spiral, and sometimes you'll say something and then immediately argue with yourself about it 5 seconds later. It's not that you don't have an opinion, it's more like you've got several and they're all taking turns. So if you ask a Gemini a question, you might get a committee discussion in return. But on the plus side, you'll never lose an argument because you've already considered both sides. Moving on to health and that wonderful illustration of ancient anatomical insanity known as the Zodiac Man. Manilius said, "The arms, bright twins, are subject to your rule." So that's your arms, your elbows and your donnies, which makes perfect sense. Typing, pointing things out, waving your arms around while you're trying to explain something. Ptolemy had a slightly different take. He said, and if the planets happen to be posited in the latter degrees of the sign, this can result in gout. Nasty. So you might want to steer clear of port, pheasant, plum duff, or any of those rich stodgy foods that take 6 months to work their way through your system and come out the other end like a concrete wardrobe. Now for wealth and careers. Going back to Ptolemy for a second, he said Gemini and Mercury natives are therefore highly intellectual and sensible and gifted with capacity for every undertaking. They are also magicians performing secret rites and ceremonies, and they are in every respect calculated for the prosecution of all scientific inquiry. So basically you want to become an intellectual occult practicing philosophy teaching scientist. Not sure what the job market looks like for that, but it makes for one hell of a LinkedIn profile. Now it's time for Love Hour, and with the twins things can get interesting. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, so communication is everything. If you can't talk, joke and bounce ideas around, it's probably not going to last very long. You need stimulation. Get your mind out of the gutter. I'm talking about intellectual stimulation. Someone who can keep up, keep things interesting, and ideally doesn't mind the conversation taking a few unexpected turns. If you're dating a Gemini, you might find that 1 minute you're having a deep conversation about life, the universe and everything, the next you're discussing whether cider counts as one of your 5 a day. You're charming, quick-witted and easy to talk to, which makes you very easy to fall for, but also quite hard to pin down. Intellectually speaking, that is. But what we really need to know is, how does all this romantic pontification play out in the wild world of dating?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Star-Crossed. This week's breezy bachelor is Gemini, quick-witted, endlessly curious, and capable of holding a full conversation with himself. Will he find his perfect twin, or will he blow away in the wind? Let's meet our 3 gorgeous hopefuls. Will it be Scorpio, intense, passionate, and already knows everything about Gemini, including things he's never told anyone? Or how about Aquarius, unconventional, unpredictable, and unhappy with the structure of this format? Or could it be Sagittarius, honest, enthusiastic, and absolutely not thinking this through? Gemini, the question is simple. Who can keep up?
So, what are you looking for in a relationship? And by that I mean not just generally, but like day to day, because I feel like that's where it actually matters. Although I do suppose the bigger picture is important as well. But yeah, what are you looking for?
I'm looking for something deep, really deep. I want to know everything about you, what you think, what you feel, what you're not saying.
Ooh. I'm more interested in the idea of a relationship than the traditional structure of one. I think it should be flexible and based on mutual understanding rather than expectation.
Honestly, just someone fun. Someone who wants to go places, try things, and not take it all too seriously. If we're laughing, it's working.
Well, Gemini, it's make your mind up time.
Right, okay, so depth, flexibility and fun. I mean, ideally all 3, but I feel like that might be asking a bit much. Although not impossible, but also slightly concerning.
Please hurry along. We need to clear the studio in time for topless darts.
Right, okay, I think I'm gonna go with Sagittarius. Or maybe Aquarius. No, definitely Sagittarius.
And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Air and fire. They've lit the match. What could possibly go wrong? And speaking of disasters waiting to happen, it's time for Star-Crossed Tinder edition.
I notice everything. Details matter.
I do tend to miss a few.
If you don't text back, I'll assume you're dead and come looking for you.
That's reassuring.
I like things the way I like them.
I feel like I'd changed something by accident.
We'll care for you deeply and remember everything you've ever done.
I like the first part. The second part feels like it might come up later.
If I'm not the priority, I'm not interested.
I can prioritise. Briefly.
I'm focused on long-term success.
I like the direction. I'm just not sure I'd stay on it.
I want everything to be perfect.
That sounds unrealistic. I'm curious.
I go where the feeling takes me.
I think I can find my way there.
I ask a lot of questions and occasionally answer them myself.
Perfect. I've always fancied a foursome.
The constellation of Gemini.
Time now to check out the twins in the night sky, and I'm happy to report that this constellation actually looks like what it's supposed to. You can very clearly see what looks like 2 stick men holding hands. Once you spot them, you really can't unsee it. 2 figures standing side by side, mid-conversation, possibly arguing, more likely talking over each other. The 2 brightest stars are Castor and Pollux, and they're 2 of the brightest stars in the night sky. Pollux is the brighter of the 2. It's a huge red giant about 34 light years away, which makes it the closest red giant to Earth. Castor is actually half a dozen different stars that look like one to the naked eye. In ancient times, these stars were associated with navigation, guiding sailors across the sea. So even here, Gemini is linked with communication and helping people find their way. Whether they agreed on the direction is a different matter. Gemini is particularly visible in the Northern Hemisphere during January, which is nice because there's not much else going on at that time of the year. There's some deep sky objects in there too, including Able 21 or the Medusa Nebula. This is a vast planetary nebula, so it's basically a glowing shell of ionized gas thrown out by a dying star. Just don't look directly at it or you might get a stiff neck. For fans of the sidereal system, if you're blowing out your birthday candles between June 16th and June 20th, you're a Gemini in the tropical and sidereal systems. If you were born between May 21st and June 15th, you'd be considered a Taurus in sidereal astrology.
Correspondence Corner!
Kicking things off with the tarot cards, for Gemini that gives us the 8, 9 and 10 of Swords, the King of Swords and the Queen of Cups, the Page and the Ace of Pentacles, and the Lovers is Gemini's trump card. First up, the 8 of Swords runs from May 21st to May 31st and is Jupiter in Gemini. So here we've got expansion meeting an already active mind. That can manifest as confusion and not being able to see a way forward. Next, the 9 of Swords runs from June 1st to June 10th and is Mars in Gemini. This is where all that mental energy speeds up a bit too much. Thoughts become sharper, more urgent, sometimes very difficult to switch off. And finally, the 10 of Swords runs from June the 11th to June 20th and is the Sun in Gemini. This is what happens when the mind reaches its limit, but it's also a reset point. Once things have gone as far as they can, there's nowhere to go but back to clarity. The King of Swords runs from May the 11th to June 10th, covering the last decan of Taurus and the first 2 decans of Gemini. This is the mind at its most clear and controlled, thought that's been refined, organised and expressed with precision. The Queen of Cups runs from June the 11th to July the 11th, covering the final decan of Gemini and the first 2 decans of Cancer. Here we move out of pure thought and into feeling. The mind softens a little, becoming more intuitive and more aware of what's going on beneath the surface. The Page and the Ace of Pentacles rule the quadrant of the Zodiac wheel that covers Aries, Taurus and Gemini. So again we're at that point where ideas start to become something more tangible. Thought begins to take form, moving out of the abstract and into the real world, which is a good thing because otherwise it would all just stay in your head. Finally, we've got the Lovers for Gemini's Major Arcana card. Obviously this is about romance, but it's also about choice, duality, and the relationship between 2 sides of the same whole, which brings us right back to the twins. We've got 2 paths and the constant question of which one to follow. Moving on to the Tree of Life, Gemini sits on the 17th path, joining Binah to Tiferet. In simple terms, that's the path between understanding and the self, taking what's been learned and experienced and bringing it into who you actually are. The Hebrew letter for this path is Zayin, which means sword. Not in the sense of hacking things to bits, but in the sense of clarity, the ability to separate, distinguish and make sense of things. In the Chicken Kabbalah, L'Armalo Diket says a sword is an instrument of division, separating one thing from another, like your enemy's head from his shoulders, and of discretion and analysis, separating one idea from another. Getting onto the gemstones, and once again Otter Spirit have managed to capture the essence of Gemini with a whole collection, which feels very appropriate, because if there's one sign that doesn't want to be stuck with just one option, it's Gemini. The link's in the description, and if you do pick something up, you can use the code KIPPY20 for 20% off or KIPPY30 for 30% off orders over $100. First, we've got Aquatica Gate for healing. This is all about calming the mind and easing mental tension. For Gemini, where things can get a bit busy upstairs, it helps smooth things out and bring back a bit of emotional balance. Next is Clear Quartz for cleansing. This one's all about clarity and focus. It helps to clear the mind and the mental clutter, making it a bit easier to organise your thoughts and land on something. Then we've got Sunstone for confidence. This brings a bit of warmth, optimism and self-belief. It gives Gemini that little push to commit to an idea and run with it. Finally, the Celestite for communication. This one has a much softer energy. It supports gentle expression and understanding, helping you find the right words without feeling the need to say everything all at once. Now we move on to the herbs. Just a quick note to say where I'm getting these correspondences from. I'm using the Herbal Tarot. I'm pointing this out in reply to any comments like,
Actually, I think you'll find that basil isn't associated with Mars in 17th century Slovakian cheese magic.
Well, I needed to settle on one system and I really like this deck. Anyway, we're bringing back Dr. Neuralis for this one, as he's a bit of an all-round clever clogs.
Welcome back to the Department of Human Optimization. Today we are developing a conversational enhancement for Gemini. The goal is simple: improve wit, clarity and verbal dexterity without triggering complete psychological fragmentation. First, parsley. Harmless enough in a garnish, but in sufficient quantities it appears to make the subject oddly persuasive.
Persuasive how?
Romantically, we're monitoring it. Valerian is included to reduce nervous agitation. Unfortunately, it also makes the test subject look as though they are losing an argument with a cloud. Black cohosh has been included for stability. Gemini requires occasional grounding to prevent the personality from starting arguments with itself. Lady's mantle has been added to maintain composure. It encourages a sense of order, which the rest of the formula is working very hard to undermine. A Phaedra has been removed from the formula on account of the incident.
What incident?
The one where Subject B attempted to finish everyone else's sentences before they'd started them.
Just a quick note to say the channel now has memberships, so if you fancy going a bit deeper, we've got extra videos and a few surprises along the way. A huge thank you to everyone who's already joined. Your support means we can keep this madness going. So that's Gemini, the sign of curiosity, conversation, and seeing things from more than one point of view, sometimes all at the same time. It's quick thinking, quick talking, and occasionally halfway through something before it's quite sure what that something is, which can look a bit chaotic from the outside, but from the inside it's just how the mind works. Always moving, always exploring, and always finding something new to think about. It asks questions and it isn't afraid to change direction if something more interesting comes along. As Natalie Portman once said, I'm a Gemini, so I change my mind every day.
Thank you for joining us on this sprint through Gemini. May your questions be answered, your ideas be fruitful, and your mind agree with itself. Until next time.